Members, I think it is 7:15, so if we could make a start, please, that would be good. And welcome everybody to this meeting of the Local Plan Subcommittee, Tuesday 17th of December. Very nice to see you all. I will start with some apologies. I have two, Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Walsh. Councillor Van Dolken is substituting for Councillor Ritchie. I've no other apologies at the moment. Declarations of interest. Could I ask for any declarations of any disclosable pecuniary interest or any other interest having regard to the Code of Conduct, please? Anybody? Councillor Butland.
I declare two in respect of item 5. One as a member of Essex County Council who have made comment to it, and also on the same one I am a member of English Heritage, which have also made comment on this item.
Right, thank you. Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just on item 5, being a member of Essex County Council.
Thank you. And Councillor Tunningham, I suspect the same.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, same declaration, please,
Okay,
as a member of Essex County Council.
No one else? Fine, good, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on 31st of October, which have been circulated. If nobody has any comments on those, could I please have a seconder that they're a correct record? Councillor Bowes, a mover, Councillor Bowes, a seconder. Somebody, Councillor Butland, thank you. And could I please have a show of hands of approval? Thank you very much, members. Okay, good. Public question time. We have nobody registered to speak, so we can move on to the first item, which is the Silver End Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan, which is going to be presented by Chris Paggi. We also have with us this evening Laura Johnson from Place Services. Very nice to see you, and I'm sure both will be happy to take any questions afterwards. But Chris, over to you for this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me this evening. So, yeah, the first item is to consider the Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan for Silver End. Laura's actually prepared a presentation, so we'll take members through, but just by way of introduction, we do have a verbal update this evening. So within the published reports, it referenced that we hadn't received a representation from the Parish Council at the time of publication. We have received a comment from the Parish Council to confirm that they are in full support of the Conservation Area Appraisal. So that's an update for you this evening, but I'll pass over to Laura, who will take you through the presentation, and then between the two of us, we're happy to answer any questions and clarifications on next steps, if that's okay.
So as we've said, I'm Laura. I work at Place Services and I'm a senior built heritage consultant there, but I'm one of the two conservation officers sort of dedicated to Braintree. And I've been working on Silver End for the whole time I've been here, so 6 years pretty much now. And this appraisal sort of follows on from work that my colleagues who are still with me at Place Services did in 2014. So this is just really to say what's the purpose of it. So conservation areas are designated as part of the 1990 Planning List of Buildings and Conservation Areas Act. They have to be of special architectural historic interest and one that's desirable to preserve or enhance. And then part 71 of that act gives this sort of little blurb here that says it's the duty of local planning authority from time to time, which is quite a loose reference there, to formulate and publish proposals for the preservation and enhancement of that area. So that's what a conservation area appraisal is. We follow guidelines that are set out by Historic England and that give you sort of an idea of what you need to do, what makes a conservation area special. There's lots of them, I'm sure you know what they are. So Silver End is important. If you don't know it, go have a look. It's a really significant thing, I think, for Essex, but also wider. I think we could probably claim it's got some national importance. all for Crittall Windows, and it was their showcase for what they could do. The factory was there. These are houses that have them. Great, come and see. Unfortunately, Crittall they did step away from the village in the mid-20th century, and the ownership of the village passed to the local authority. It was Whittam at that point, not Braintree. But following that, the village and the character of it fell into quite a steady decline. This was recognised and it was designated as conservation area in 1983. An Article 4 direction was put in place, and that restricts permitted development rights throughout, mainly to target the things that were being lost. So people were painting the houses mad colours, rendering it, obviously the loss of the windows, changes to doors, alterations and various other things that are caught under the Article 4. So the reason we're looking at it again, as I said, it was done in 2014. So 10 years have passed, things have changed, and most importantly, the conservation area is at risk, which is something it has been for quite a long time, and it's recognised by Historic England as being on their at-risk register. So I think it's quite important that we constantly looking through it again, seeing what the challenges are, if they're still the same, and whether or not this Article 4 direction is working and if it's relevant. And as councillors probably know, or do know, there is a lot of resident pressure as to how the houses work, what windows they can have. So the changes between this document and the previous version, very, very minor in terms of the boundary. We're adding in the Catholic Church, which was previously excluded because it's not part of the original Crittall phase of the village's development in the early, well, sort of 20s and 30s. I think it dates from 53-ish. But I think it's really quite lovely. It's definitely fits in with the kind of architectural quality of the conservation area. And most importantly, if it is in the conservation area, it can't be demolished without permission. At the moment, it could just go and we'd lose it. So also within this document, we've got a new guidance on replacement windows, what the council are going to accept going on, because we've had quite a mixture of different planning permissions and things that have been approved. We've reduced the character areas down to 4, which should make the whole thing a bit more easy to understand. And generally, we've sort of amended the layout. So within each character area, it says, these are the windows that are here, this is the roof type, and it should be a bit more prescriptive and a bit easier for residents to understand. And then finally, what we're asking here, and Chris will go into detail, is that delegated powers go to Chris and your team, is that correct? No?
Sure.
Yeah, you jump in.
So for members, so the recommendation for this evening is for members to approve the new conservation area appraisal and management plan, and then subject to the resolution on that, the next steps would be we would then, as an officer team, go away and look at the Article 4 direction and the new design guide, with a view of then taking that forward based on the principles that are set out within the conservation area appraisal that's before you this evening. And then those documents would then come back, so the design guide would come back to this committee at a later date for approval, which would set out in more detail the prescriptive guidance in terms of the alterations that can be done, can't be done to the property, and what would be acceptable in a planning sense.
Yeah, what I meant to say is, so the document in the minutes says it's proposed, but you want permission to change that. Is that correct?
No, so the recommendation this evening is for the approval of the conservation area appraisal and management plan. We've asked for, there might be some minor amendments to the wording potentially within the document, but the document is pretty much in a final state, so we just need to do a final version and check on the document subject to members' resolution this evening. And then the next stage, as I said, would be looking at the Article 4 direction and the conservation area guide to replace the existing one from 1999.
And that's, all of it. Thank you.
Okay, anything else from Chris, you or Laura at the moment? No? Right, thank you very much indeed. I would say I think this is a really good document. Had a look through it and it's nice to look at. It's got a lot of very interesting information and I appreciate there's a lot of it. But if members, if you haven't already, do have a look through. There's a lot of fascinating information in there about the history of Silver End and where we are now. So good. So I will open this up for debate. Councillor Abbott, strongly suspected you might be first to go. Right.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and with your indulgence and apologies to members who have to listen to me droning on for a few minutes, there are a few points I'd like to raise. First of all, to say this coming May I'll have represented the village of Silver End continuously for 26 years. So I feel I know the village fairly well and its people. And the first thing I'm going to say, it's not a grand place. Some conservation areas will have lots of historic buildings, what Silver Enders would regard as quite posh houses, and a level of wealth perhaps that Silver End doesn't have. Silver End's got a lot of ordinary people living there in inverted commas, and a lot of social housing. So quite a number of the houses within the conservation area are owned by Eastlight, for example. And that speaks to what I'm going to say in a little bit about some of the criticisms of what's happened to the conservation area. But the ability of people who live in Silver End to upkeep their area, perhaps as other conservation areas might find it a little bit easier to do. As is stated, the conservation area is at risk. It's been at risk for some time, and as you, Madam Chairman, will know, we've been banging on your door for years to get this document. So I'm glad it's here, and I would agree, having spent hours on it this afternoon, that it is a good read in general, and the layout's good, which helps. There's not 6-point writing, which you need, for me, several magnifying glasses to read. But if you read the residents' concerns over and over again, they refer to problems with cold, damp housing. And unless through this process we address the ability of residents to live in the 21st century and not the early 20th century, having said that, the houses in Silver End, when they were built, had hot and cold running water, which the house I live in didn't have till the 1960s. So, but nevertheless, people expect different living conditions now. We're not going to move the village on, a village which I think has suffered chronic underinvestment and attention from all of the authorities, not just Braintree District Council, which I keep complaining about, but Essex County Council, Eastlight and others. It's a large village, many thousands of people living there, and we haven't even had remotely near the proportion of investment that places like Braintree have had, or other villages. So going through the detail on the document, there are some omissions and errors and some typos, I'm afraid. I would say at the start, some of the description around the setting of the village could include, for example, reference to the Rivenhall Place parkland setting. It is referred to later on in the document, and I know it's outside the conservation area and most of it's outside the parish boundary, but if you look at an aerial view of Silver End, it's clearly very important, that side, and that also speaks to the historic context of the farmhouse and the pub around the junction of Western Lane and Western Road, which is referred to. That's all part of the sort of historic pre-modern Silver End. There's quite a few errors and omissions where it talks about the modern development. So, for example, it talks about 314 houses. The Red Rose site off Western Road is 350, not 314. And it talks about the 60 houses off Borstie Road, but there's a lot of other sites that have recently got permission or are being built out. So perhaps I could give you a list. Fully support the extension for the Catholic Church. That makes absolute sense. So coming on to the typos, perhaps give you a list. Would that be easier rather than read them all out?
I think Councillor, that
The
would
time.
be...
Definitely, yes,
yeah,
please.
I think it's,
I thought so. There's about 6.
that would make sense.
Okay. Page 35, it mentions doors wooden doors. So my first question is, it doesn't mention composite doors. It does say in the discussion later on that a lot of doors have been allowed composite or are in place composite. Does that mean we're going back to only wooden doors being allowed? Because that's going to cause a major ruction in the village if that's what's going in the design guide.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott, for the question. So what the appraisal sets out is some of the principles, and obviously there is the potential to replace windows and doors. The starting point for both is to see if repair is first possible and then potential replacement. So the detail of the replacement is something that through the new design code, design document, it would set out the materiality, the pattern, the design that would be acceptable, which is a further detail that we'd have to work through. But the principles here around maintaining the uniformity is the thing that comes through with the appraisal document. That's the overriding point that is unique about the character of Silver End.
Yeah, but I don't really understand that, because this document does talk in great detail about the window design and the materials. So surely it should talk about the door materials as well. Because all it says is, I agree repair first if it can be done, and wooden replacement, but a lot of people, and planning are allowing this currently in the last few years, have allowed composite doors. So surely we can say tonight, is that going to still be allowed, or are we going to say you've got to have a wooden door?
So the purpose of the design document will be to set out the materiality precisely in terms of what is acceptable and what is not. So that's the purpose, to give that prescriptive guidance. And as we've set out within the cover report, that's what we want that document to essentially provide, so that residents within the village know exactly for their particular property what window, what door type is acceptable, but also the materiality point. I think it's fair to say I think it's something that is under consideration, is part of that discussion, as part of the design document in terms of the materiality point.
I'm just going to come. So we're not. Are we saying that people who have put in composite doors, they're not going to be asked to replace those, or are they?
So, subject to members approving this document this evening and then going through the process, looking at the Article 4 and the design guide, one of the principles that's set out within the appraisal, so taking windows as the example, is that the intention is that you would, over time, where windows doors come through for renewal, they would need to comply with the new design guide, and then over a period of time, the intention would be that would then restore the uniformity of the conservation area.
Okay, I understand that. I mean, I do know that this, obviously, it has been a real issue, but I think particularly with windows that have needed replacing, and it is very clear that there are problems now with mould, draft, and so on. And I noticed this particularly looking through the document on page 34 under statement on windows and doors. It says, the Crittall window is key, and then goes on to say Silver End Conservation Area would simply not exist without these windows. They are fundamental to the aesthetics of the conservation area and also the authenticity, integrity and architectural value. And I absolutely understand that, and that we don't want a mishmash, if I can put it this way, of different styles and designs. On the other hand, I do appreciate that for people living in those homes, and particularly with energy costs the way they are, and mould, which is not a good thing at all, it is a problem. So there is a balance to be struck, I think. But yeah, okay. Sorry, Councillor Abbott, come.
Well, thank you for everything officers and yourself, Chairman, have said, but I'm none the wiser, and I fear, from what you've said, that there's going to be an intention here to move back to wooden doors because they're the original. Well, I think it needs to say that in the document. Moving on, page 58, complaints about the state of the verges and loss of hedges. I completely agree about the loss of hedges and would very strongly support that a move to try and get some of the original boundary front hedges back. where we can, the original privet hedges. They continue to be lost. Some have been lost even this summer, and that I would totally agree with that. However, on the verges, if we hadn't done what we've done in Silver End with the grass creep, and that's referred to on page 57, particularly with the school road, you literally would not be able to get an emergency vehicle down those roads at night. That was one of the reasons we did it. They were double parking. They either parked on the grass verges and churned them up to pieces, or they double parked and you couldn't get a vehicle down there. And obviously when Silver End was built and it's coming up to its 100th year next year, nobody envisaged that everyone would have two cars in a household, or three, or more. So we are where we are, and so the grass creep, yeah, it doesn't look as good as a grass verge, but the grass verge wouldn't be there anyway. It would have been churned to pieces. On the loss of the trees, totally agree with that, and this meeting is a good opportunity for me to say we are working on a project with Section 106 officers for quite a comprehensive replanting of specimen trees in School Road, Valentine Way and Broadway, which is funded. We just got to get everybody on board in terms of ownership, and one of them is the County Council. Both Rivenhall, because the money is for Rivenhall and Silver End, both Rivenhall and Silver End Parish Councils the last few days have agreed the list of trees. We've got a number of tick boxes to do yet, but that will partly address this issue. And getting School Road look much more uniform in terms of tree planting, filling in the gaps in Valentine Way, and also having 4 big feature trees at the top end of Broadway, which are replacing the original ornamental hawthorns, which have all been mullered over the last few years or died. So that is in hand, at least for those parts of the village. Page 59 also refers to parking. I won't reiterate what I've just said. The old factory site, now the old factory site is an opportunity to address some of these parking issues. We've been suggesting for years that when it's redeveloped, we could have some parking in that vicinity, which would help with the most acute parking problems, which are in School Road, in Valentine Way, and also on the main road that goes through the village, which is actually dangerous. I was knocked off my bike there, suffered quite a nasty injury. Could have been a lot worse. I've still got my bike frame with the pedal. It's an old metal frame bike with the pedal bent underneath the frame. That could have been my leg. And that was because someone tried to overtake me as I was going past those parked cars. It's still dangerous today. And I think as a local ward member, I would say now, obviously I don't know what's being discussed. We're not being kept informed about the old factory site, but discussions are underway. But if that doesn't include any help with parking in that area, then things are just going to get worse. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I think the state of the old factory site is a failure. It's a failure of ambition, it's a failure of planning. Whilst that has lain derelict for over a decade, coming up to 2 decades now, all around the village greenfields have been built on, and we should have been building there first. And as many residents have commented in the responses to this consultation, they've seen the factory site laid derelict. They can see the incinerator chimney being built over the way. They've got all these housing estates being around by the village, but they're told you can't change your front door, or you can't change your windows, or if you do, you've got to do... There is a lot of tension there in the village about what they see the big developers being allowed to do and then not being allowed to do. So the conservation area has lost some of the support from the village it should have. I support it in principle, but it has lost some of that because of this feelings of unfairness. Page 71, there's criticism of the state of the gardens and the painting of the houses. And page 72, it talks about incongruous features including CCTV, doorbells, house nameplates, meter boxes and cables. Really? What are people supposed to do? Are people not allowed to have satellite dishes and and cables on their houses and ring bells in Silver End when they are in pretty much everywhere else in the district? I did find that difficult, and I come back to the same point about the gardens and the paintings I did earlier on. It's not the richest village in the district. There's a lot of elderly people. There's a lot of people with health problems. They can't necessarily maintain their houses to the same standards as the rest of us who might be more able-bodied and have the means to do it. So I just think it doesn't really reflect reality. Page 72, there's criticism of potholes. Well, I believe Place Services is attached to Essex County Council. County Council are responsible for potholes. I believe there is no special means of dealing with potholes in conservation areas. Correct me if I'm wrong. We try our level best with the County Council to get them to fill in potholes, to repair broken drain covers, pavements and all the rest of it. I hammer them on a almost daily basis, as does the parish councils and others. And we do quite well, actually, considering I accept the County Council's got limited budgets, but I'm not sure why that is specifically pulled out when there's nothing we can do policy terms, because, as I say, there isn't a specific policy that says in a conservation area you should have your potholes filled in. Page 73 suggests, and I'm more hopeful on this one, that renewable energy can be incorporated into the new guide, subject to careful siting, and that's good. I hope that is the case, because obviously we want to be encouraging residents to do that. Page 74 refers to the Friends of Silverend Heritage Society. I think it's just Silverend Heritage Society. Page 74 also refers to heritage boards more widely in the village. That's another project we've got ongoing between the Heritage Society, ourselves as district councillors, Section 106 officer, parish council. There is now a plan for where they should go. No funding yet as such, but well, not a lot of funding, but there is a plan. So totally agree with that one. In other words, these would be sort of interpretation boards as well. Also agree with the idea of an information leaflet for all residents to try and, in the most straightforward way possible, explain what the conservation area is. I've already mentioned gardens. Page 76 says enforcement, planning enforcement. That really goes back to what I was just saying about the feeling of unfairness. I'm not trying to make any adverse comments about anyone here in particular. I'm just making a statement of fact. There has been inconsistency on planning enforcement. There's been one this summer where I'm not going to say where it is or what it is, but a really egregious case, clear breach. I reported it multiple times, asked for a stop notice, none was put on. That breach is now completed. The work, that breach is now completed. So either that person's got to retrospectively apply for something that's completely outside of the planning rules, or they've got to remove the whole thing. And I don't understand why it wasn't stopped. So that is another thing which aggrieves local people. Page 77 talks about the public realm and street lights. Well, without extending this for double the time I've already spoken, the County Council has put up urban-style street lights in Silverend recently in association with the new housing, both on Western Road outside the conservation area but near it, and Borstie Road within the conservation area. I asked for what you might get in a conservation area: better design, black columns, warm colours. We've got white floodlight, huge urban street lights. So again, you've got one side of the County Council with this document, you know, generally good document, saying what we should do, but Essex Highways just putting in your bog standard urban street lights. Page 77 refers to parking permits. Under no circumstances, we have touched on this before in the village, it would be a complete disaster and hugely unfair. I mean, I invite, if anyone thinks here I'm exaggerating, do walk round Silverend of a night, well, not on this weather necessarily, but of a nice summer's evening, and look at where we are with the parking. Parking permits would just mean people would have to pay for where they're already trying to park. It just wouldn't work. But I do agree about the need to get more off-street parking, and that links into the old factory site. Trees, page 78, I already mentioned that. GP surgery being a bit of an incongruous design. Yes, but it's all we've got, and we're looking to expand it. That's what the NHS should happen, and it's either got to happen on that site or on a different site. Page 79, interestingly, Silverend Parish Council is listed as a charity which could help fund improvements to the conservation area. I think they must have missed that bit when they responded to you today, because I can't imagine that they thought that was a particularly good point, but I just thought I'd mention it. And then finally, you'll be glad to hear, page 87 discusses TPO trees. I'm wondering whether this document could list the TPO trees in the village, or whether that's too much work, or whether we could be looking to TPO more trees or more groups of trees to give that extra protection. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. I'm going to ask officers to pick up on as much of that as they can. There's quite a lot in there. One thing I will just say on the Crittall site, I had just a brief conversation yesterday with Corporate Director. Actually, as ward members, you and Councillor Wright, you have been kept as up to date as anybody. You really have. I know that discussions are ongoing and it is moving in a positive direction. It is very slow, only because it's important to get it right, but progress is being made. But I'm sure that when there is anything new or different to report, you and Councillor Wright will certainly be told about it. But it is progressing. Right, Chris, Laura, between you, over to you with as much of that as you can come back on, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I think there was just 3 points probably that I was just going to respond to, because obviously there was a number of points there where Councillor Abbott will pick up those minor points you've made on the document. So just starting on with the TPO points that you raised as last point. So the fact that any trees within the conservation area are afforded a certain amount of protection by reason of the fact that if you were to propose to do works to that tree, you would need to notify the authority. So that's not unique to Silver End. That would be across the district. And the purpose of that notification is not for us to approve the works, but it's to give the council the opportunity to consider whether the tree is worthy of preservation. So it's a check and balance for us as a team. So the notification would come through. We would then consider whether or not that tree is worthy of preservation and meets the test, the quality that the tree should be retained. So that's our ability essentially to review and then consider whether or not a TPO is warranted or not. On the enforcement point, so I know the specific case that you're referring to. Obviously that goes beyond the scope of what members are considering this evening, which is the appraisal and the management plan for Silver End. I think there are specific circumstances, and again, without going into detail, but we cannot simply just issue a stop notice for things. It is not against the law to undertake works without planning permission, unless of course you're talking about a listed building, and there is an enforcement process that needs to be followed. So I'm happy to pick up a conversation offline about specific cases, but that goes beyond the scope of what members are considering this evening. On the point about minor elements to houses such as satellite dishes, I think it is worth just making the point that, again, this is not unique to Silver End. So if we're talking about listed buildings, conservation areas, there are restrictions for things like satellite dishes, where they can be positioned, what you can physically attach to buildings, if it's listed and so forth. And that's something that we have to grapple with as a development management team on a daily basis when we're dealing with listed building applications or applications for works to properties which are in other conservation areas. And it comes with the territory that if you have a property within a conservation area, the fact that you are located in the conservation comes with certain restrictions. So again, part of the work that we've started looking at, and obviously would be subject to further discussion and debate in the design document, will be how we can facilitate some of that, things like renewable energy or other things, how replacement windows, doors can take place, but in an acceptable way that balances those heritage considerations against residents wanting to improve their properties. So some of these points are not unique to Silver End. It would be a wider planning heritage point. Madam Chairman, I think that was all the points I was going to pick up. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. I mean, yes, Laura did say at the start that this is a historically important site, village rather, for the district, and I agree. I think it goes beyond that. I think it's nationally important because it is quite unique. And I know it's frustrating because I have it within my ward. I think we all do. When you live in a conservation area, and in addition to that, in a listed building, you are restricted on what you can do, and that's how it is. So I noticed that in the some of the comments from the consultation on this, there were some really good comments in there and people very supportive about preserving it. The historic aspects. There were also, at least I think, a couple of people saying actually just do away with the conservation area altogether and we should just do what we want. Well, I'm afraid it doesn't work like that, and I think it would be pretty terrible actually if that happened in Silver End, because it is a very special place, whilst acknowledging the problems about replacing windows and doors as we discussed. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. A fascinating document, excellent presentation. I really very much enjoyed hearing Councillor Abbott's comprehensive response to it. I just wonder, and as I say, there's a lot here that is extremely sound, I believe, but I'm just wondering, as we go to the next stage, whether there is scope for some, should we say, elasticity in terms of policy interpretation. I'm particularly relating to this doors. Now, forgive me, I'm venturing down an area of knowledge for me with which there is no beginning. So, in terms of composite doors, is there a compromise there that there could be some wording about sensitive to the character, or with a certain wooden imitation look, or something along those lines? Again, I think a community that has extremely unique circumstances and a unique origin shouldn't necessarily be subjective to sort of rather unique punitive measures, I'm very, very sympathetic with Councillor Abbott on that point, and wonder if there's a little bit more elasticity of goodwill we could perhaps show there. Also, particularly the point about sky dishes, satellite dishes, those type of things. And I absolutely get the point about conservation area, but going back to the point that Councillor Abbott made about Silver End isn't a grand, ultimately high, particularly hugely affluent area. I think there's something different about a satellite dish on Silver End as opposed to maybe, dare I say, a period property of some size in Turling or Coggeshall or Bradford Street or Gosfield or somewhere like that. I think that has to be seen in context, and whether at the next stage there can be something about positioning, angling, rear of the properties. Again, I'm venturing into areas of which my knowledge isn't terribly great, but I just offer that up and see whether we can perhaps add a little bit of additionality to the policy, and perhaps a little bit of additional elasticity and latitude to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. I'm too sympathetic about the doors issue, and wonder if there's a little wriggle room there to just help people out a bit. Satellite dishes, well, I don't know.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham, for the question. So if I just take the satellite dish point to start with, so as I said, this isn't unique to Silver End. This would be unique to any heritage asset in terms of what we need to kind of grapple with. I think with evolutions in broadband and speeds and streaming, actually satellite dishes potentially could be very soon a thing of the past and less prevalent. So it may naturally be an issue that falls away by itself, but that's not to say if they are proposed that they can't be placed in a position that still gives the resident effectively the signal for what they're seeking to do. So we would approach it as we do at the moment to try to find a practical solution which respects the heritage asset. So it's trying to ensure that it's not damaging to and harmful to the conservation area. I think the point around the doors, so again, in terms of what members are considering this evening with the appraisal and the management plan, is it's looking at the conservation area boundary, it's setting out the principles. The design code document will set out that materiality, but it's been very clear from the resident feedback, and obviously some of the decisions that have been made on an ad hoc basis as well, in the absence of an up-to-date design code, have allowed the use of composite doors. The uniqueness about Silver End is the uniformity and the repetition of features. So I think for this evening, all I can say is I think we would look to take those sort of comments back to feed into that next stage of work. acknowledging the concerns that obviously residents and members are raising in that regard, and seeing if we can come up with a set of prescriptive guidance, which, as I said, is the intent behind that next stage of work, so that everybody's got clarity on what is acceptable and what isn't as a sort of a next step. Hopefully that answers your questions, Councillor Cunning.
Thank you, Chris. I think, yeah, sorry, Laura, did you want to? No, okay.
I only wanted to reiterate that everything has been heard, and there are lots of points within the design guide that is forthcoming.
Right, good. I think that's reassuring. Councillor Butland.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I thoroughly enjoyed actually reading the paper itself. And unusually, Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Abbott and myself seem to be much closer on the same page than sometimes we normally are. As I was reading it, there was a sort of palpable tension coming through about what one would like to see, and actually if one lived in the area. And I couldn't help reflect, and in a way there was a little bit of reference made to it in the report. Remember the 1960s council estates, everybody had the same colour door. Everybody. And then with the right to buy and that sort of thing, that changed. And people were able to make some expression of themselves. I appreciate in an area like this, it is somewhat different, but I do think, and I think this is what Councillor Abbott was suggesting, that there needs to be a bit of a better balance between the purity, if I can put it that way, of the conservation area, and actually how one can respond to some of the, what to me seem to be not unreasonable wishes of residents. So I think that was one of the major things that came through for me in that. There's one, you mentioned, sort of practical thing. On paragraph 7, there's reference to the cost of appointing consultants to complete this work has been met from the existing budgets. And 7.2 is that the cost of reviewing Article 4 will be met from existing budgets. Have officers are they able to tell us how much that is, those two exercises, how much they have cost in terms of the work that has been done and the work that will need to be done on that. But overall, as someone who has been to Silver End, but not really, it wasn't until I read the report sort of really got a feel for the history of the place. Yes, I knew it was Criddles, yes, I knew it was Windows and all that, but it was a very, very informative report. I'm really grateful for that. But it does seem to me that there was a tension there, and is a tension there, which as we move forward, if we are able, I mean, to me, I wouldn't know, rather like Councillor Cunningham, I wouldn't know the difference between a wooden door and a composite door. But and I suspect many people, when looking at such things, would not themselves notice it. But when people are saying, the living conditions inside the property, such as mould, etc., is in effect as a result of some of the requirements of being in a conservation area, then it does concern me. And as Councillor Abbott said, many of the residents there are at the older end of the age scale, and I think issues such as their health and well-being is something we also need to take into account. I'm not suggesting for one moment it's easy, but I think once we're doing it, we just need to think about getting that balance perhaps a little bit better.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. If I could just ask officers to ask the question on costs, and then Councillor Bowes-Flint would like to come in. If not now, could it be provided later?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, yes, if I could come back just to confirm, because I think we just want to double check before I specify a figure, but we can come back to you on that point, Councillor Butland, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, fine. Thank you, Chris. Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Having born in the neighbouring village and grown up really with Silverend and still have a lot of friends who live in the village, I've watched it grow, almost out of control, like Cressin, and I'm just making a point there. But we have to remember, when Silverend was first there, most of the village was employed by Crittles Windows. It isn't anymore. But what does concern me is that we do still keep that character. We must never lose that. But we must also, at the same time as keeping that character, we must move with the times. And we need to be a little bit more flexible on what we're saying here, what people are allowed to do and not allowed to do. We have to understand the needs. Because if I go back years when I was chairman of housing, when I went into some of the council-owned properties as they were then, their insulation was just brick walls. Their living rooms and all of their rooms were just brick walls. Now that cannot be good. And as rightly said, there's a lot of elderly people live in Silverend and many who will not have good health. And that concerns me, and the damp concerns me as well. So what I would do now, Madam Chairman, if you will allow me, is to offer Councillor Abbott and Councillor Wright, if they wish to, if they come to me with the problems that they've got with the Eastlight properties and the tenants with damp, then I will arrange for a meeting with Eastlight and our head of service here of environmental services, because I hate to think that anybody is living in that kind of condition in this day and age. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's probably very helpful, and I hope that offer will be taken up. And I absolutely agree. It is absolutely imperative that the character of Silverend is not lost, but it does worry me that people are living in homes with mould and damp inside the homes, because that's a health hazard apart from the discomfort. It is an actual health risk. So yeah, I do think that's something we need to pay attention to.
Sorry,
Yes,
Madam
no,
Chairman, if I
that's all
can
right.
come back,
Yeah.
when I did have the meeting, as everybody round here knows that I did have a meeting, the topic of damp and mould did come up, and Eastlight did actually accept that they hadn't been on the ball with that as well, but they alleged that they were improving it. But if there are cases where there are problems, please come to me and I'll quite rightly take them up.
Okay, fine. Councillor Van Dolken.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It struck me reading this, and it was a very interesting read, as I think most have said, and it's a very interesting village. I have spent a bit of time there. It was modern at its time. It was the ultimate in modernity, and so it's a bit different from perhaps Coggeshall or Castle Hedingham, which were never intended to be groundbreakers at their time. The second thing I just wanted to say was that as we've all read the comments by some of the residents, they seem to be implying that there's issue with the windows in particular, and which I know, of course, are the metal windows, which I imagine are extremely expensive or are very expensive, more expensive than a plastic type. And it strikes me that Eastlight, which I'm sure has its financial pressures, is going to find it even more difficult than an individual who owns their house to replace the metal windows when it becomes necessary, if indeed they are double glazed. I don't know if today's replacements are. These are issues which directly impinge on the mould matter.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dolken. I don't think I see. Do you want to come back, Councillor Abbott, on anything? Yes, and then we'll.
Yeah, I'm happy to, if everyone's finished, I'm happy to move something. No, I think it's been a very good discussion. I'm tempted to move a change of text about the composite doors, but if officers are assuring us that's going to be considered in the guide, I won't now, but I can say if that guide comes up saying all doors have to be replaced with wood, I'll send them towards Causeway House and County Hall. You know, there's going to be the Silver End riot.
I think if I can just say the strong indication is that you know the points have been heard and listened to, and that at the next stage we'll have a look.
But on that, I'm happy to
we've noted it.
move acceptance and the process, subject to the points of fact which I feel need correcting, which I'm happy to provide a list for.
Yes. All right. Good. That's finally we're going to have a seconder. I think Councillor Bowles-Flint just beat Councillor Cunningham to that. Good. Yes, I think it's been a good discussion. So can I have show of hands, please, to take those recommendations forward? Thank you, members. That is unanimous. Good. Sorry, move on to item 6, which is the early engagement consultation local plan review, which is with Alan, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you very much, Councillor Spring. Just wait for the presentation. Yes, thank you. So, members may recall that in July of this year, Council launched a early engagement exercise on the local plan. The purpose of this exercise was to ascertain views from the local community, statutory and non-statutory consultees, as to what issues there are which should be considered when the council reviews its local plan. In total, we had 481 responses. The majority of those responses did come from members of the public. We did create a little word cloud just to show members the main areas where people were commenting on. There wasn't any sort of formal question structure for people to respond to. This was the purpose of this was to just let people let us know what was essentially on their mind when it comes to local plans, planning and that sort of thing. Key concerns raised primarily about infrastructure, provision of health facilities, overbuilding and housing. So yes, the concerns are really about people having too many houses built in their area, pressure on existing infrastructure like roads, doctors and schools not being able to cope with additional pupil numbers. A number of responses were also received from developers seeking to provide further information on their sites or promote additional sites. In addition, we did receive some responses from more specialist subjects. So whilst the majority of comments you can see up here were talking about these issues, we did receive comments from people like the British Horse Society, who were rather specialists, but obviously they're the only one who are really talking about that subject, so you wouldn't necessarily see it reflected in the word cloud. However, those comments are quite important and they will be considered by officers as we move forward with the consultation later and drafting of the plan. We did receive a large number of comments concerning potential site allocations, particularly around Elves Cone, Bulmer, Great Yeldham and Birdbrook, where we have the most comments about that sort of thing. So yes, there was obviously that sort of level of concern across the district there. We had some interesting responses from the statutory consultees such as Natural England and also other local authorities like Chelmsford City Council, and we had received a detailed response from the fire service. Although a lot of the comments that were made there might be more appropriate for being included in, so the design, SPD, that sort of thing. So it talks a lot about the sort of placement of electric vehicle charging points and things like that, which may stray over into building control. There was one interesting point from Anglian Water regarding the size of development. they've actually given us a indication that if you do need to have some significant changes to the local water sewage network, they recommend around allocations of around 2,000 each, because that's the sort of quantum of development that they would need to justify a significant increase in the provision of water services within a particular area. We are in the process of getting our water cycle study and strategic flood risk assessments updated as well, and we will also be meeting with Anglia Water to discuss potential site allocations when we get there, to actually sort of look at what areas are the most suitable, or which areas we might need to avoid in terms of water provision, that sort of thing. Right. So we also, just as a final point, Historic England, yes, they have provided us with guidance, as have Natural England, on things like historic buildings, biodiversity, that sort of thing. So I think the recommendation is to note the report, but we'll just say that, as I said, we did have over 480 comments. Officers will also be incorporating those comments into further reporting as we take the villages and different subjects to this committee. So they will all they will all be duly considered as we move forward with the local plan review. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised on the comments on infrastructure around, health, education, transport. Just to be clear, the Anglia Water comment, so are they saying that in order to be able to justify an increase in capacity, we need to be looking at sites of 2,000 or more homes?
In areas where there is an identified issue.
Right, okay.
So if there's a problem with a particular sewage work and you need to upgrade it significantly, 2,000 is about the quantum level of development you would need to do that. We will receive further advice from Anglia Water on that matter, though. So yes, it's
right,
something
thank
to
you.
consider.
Okay. Right, comments? Anyone? Councillor Bowers and then Councillor Parker.
It's just a very small comment, but the title of the report, shouldn't it be Braintree District Local Plan Review rather than just Braintree?
Yes.
Oh, that's, yes. Well spotted. Good, yep. Right, we'll make sure that's corrected. Councillor Parker.
Yes, it's just a question really on who was consulted, because I see that in 3.1 it's public communities, developers, parish councils and all groups and organisations on the consultation database. So I was just interested to know who you actually have on the consultation database, and is it just statutory consultees, does it go a lot wider than that?
It goes wide. We have every statutory consultee on there, every parish council, every adjacent parish council, every adjacent local authority, the county council's on there, numerous interest groups, the public. It's very wide ranging. So anyway, anyone can join our database, consultation database, if they wish to. Yes, and we're just trying to sort of get as many groups on there as possible. So yes, it was. So that's the consultation database. We also did some, PR stuff around the consultation as well. So we could get people who were not necessarily on that database would, hopefully be made aware of the consultation. And we had, pretty good turnout from it. Often a lot of the people who have responded weren't on the database either. So we've got some people who are now a bit more aware of what's going on in the local area, which is good. And where they've indicated that they want to be included on our database, we're happy to put them on there, and they'll receive further communications from us.
Okay, good. Right, any other comments from anyone? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Just very briefly, Madam Chairman. What I wrote down, having read the comments, was it is almost impossible to reconcile these competing pressures. So I suppose our job in the local plan review is to make the best we can of doing that.
Yes.
But I think it's going to be challenging.
Yep, I think that's a fair summary, actually. Yeah, yes, okay. Right, anyone else? No? So, thank you for that. So this report is just for noting. Is that agreed with everyone? Yep. Good, right. So, item 7, issues and options consultation, local plan review, which is also with Alan. Please.
Thank you very much. So obviously we're in the process of reviewing our local plan. So we have to do this every 5 years in order to keep it up to date. Current local plan was adopted in 2021, part the container housing employment figures, therefore we are working to get our plan done as it will be out of date by 2026. So far we've obviously just carried out, I've just talked about the early engagement exercise, we've carried out the call for sites exercise as well. There will be further periods of consultation, including a Reg 18 and a Reg 19 consultation later in 2025, 2026. All comments received at Reg 18 will be reported to this committee. The review will look at all existing policies within the existing local plan. We have to review all the allocations and maps, as well as updating the vision and objectives, as well as updating the evidence base. I've just got to switch between glasses, but I'll try my best here. So, just to give members an idea of what we're looking at, so we've got 9 Section 1 policies we need to have a look at, 78 Section 2 policies, 70 IMSET maps. Currently we have 14,320 homes in the local plan. That will be going up a little bit. Originally we were working to a new figure of 1,098 dwellings per year. The MPPF changes have came out last week, and that figure is looking to go up to 1,115 dwellings per year, which is not a huge amount, so probably about an additional 400 houses up to 2041. Yes, we'll have to figure out how we're going to do that. Current local plan has about 66 housing allocations in it. A lot of them are quite big, such as Land East to Great Notley, and we'll obviously have to review all of those, as well as some other strategic growth location policies we have. So the evidence base, everything is being reviewed as part of this consultation. We've had some draft employment land evidence base is available in draft at the moment, which is sort of giving us a range of employment for somewhere between 0 and 21 hectares of employment growth. So we have that. Obviously members have considered the retail evidence base already and have approved that. Work is continuing on the other items listed on the slide. Right, so Section 1 is a joint local plan with us, Tendring and Colchester. So that contains our overall housing and employment numbers, as well as containing a spatial strategy for North Essex, and it also has 5 strategic objectives within it, which we'll need to consider. So the Section 2 also has its own vision and objectives, as well as a spatial strategy. The overall vision for North Essex, I won't expect everyone to read this now, it's in the local plan, but it just sets out how we currently provide development across the area, and obviously we can look at that, review it, and see whether or not it's still appropriate, whether or not we need to change it, that sort of thing. These are all the Section 2 objectives, so all our policies are meant to try and meet these objectives here. And what the issues and options document is doing is going to be asking questions about each one of these objectives, as well as each one of these policies, basically saying, is this policy still fit for purpose, etc. Our actual spatial strategy for Section 2 is quite a lot shorter, which I think a little bit more succinct than that. So we will need to be looking at that, and we're asking the question, is this still an appropriate strategy for guiding development in the district? And that is obviously our current spatial strategy illustrated in map form. So you've got the main towns, Braintree, Houstead, Witham, key service villages, as well as the A120, A12 trunk road network. Okay, so if you've gone through the document in the appendix, you'll see there are a series of questions. There are quite a lot of questions in there because we obviously have quite a lot of policies and objectives. but we'll just essentially be asking people, whether they are continue to be appropriate, and if not, what suggestions people would have to change those policies. Right. And so, just to give you an idea of the consultation itself, so we'll be aiming to start the consultation on or around the 20th of January 2025. It'll be a 6-week consultation concluding on the 7th of March, which is a Friday. It will be carried out in accordance with our statement of consultation, statement of community involvement, sorry, and it's going to be supported by a consultation strategy which has been produced by Lauren in our PR team. These are a number of things we will be looking at as ways of consulting with people, so that includes social media interactions, advertisements in local press, exhibitions. We are intending to do some virtual and some in-person exhibitions, the dates of which will hopefully be confirmed shortly, as well as various other little bits and pieces. We've got a new micro website we're working on at the moment, which will hopefully be a little bit better in terms of presenting what is potentially quite a dry document to the public. So we'll be splitting everything up into sections, and they'll cover each of the different topics within it. So that's quite an interesting thing we'll be doing, I think. And I just mentioned about the staffed exhibitions, haven't I, and various other things that we can do there. The document will require a little bit of tidying up. There are some formatting issues within it at the moment, and there's a couple of areas that will need to be corrected. For example, I think there's a duplicate question in there at one point, so hopefully we can get those altered. But what we've got up here on the screen at the moment is the proposed sort of formatting, graphics, sorry, for the issues and options consultation, just to give members an idea as to what it looks like. So, the draft document is appended to this report. Bear in mind, we have now had some legal advice. There was some reference in the report to getting legal advice, which we've had. We can incorporate those changes in. It's primarily things about layout, setting, that sort of thing. And I think there was a missing definition, which we've now managed to track down. It was something. What was it? I could say it was something to do with transport or vision-led transport, which fortunately the MPPF now has a definition of what that actually means in it, which is good. So we can add that in there. Okay, so say document is appended to the report. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Alan. I had a preview of the new graphics last week. Personally, I like them. I think they're colourful and modern, so I'm quite happy with those. I think just before I open it up for any discussion, Sarah, did you want to say anything at this point about housing numbers or not? You don't have to. I won't make you.
Well, as Alan said, the new MPPF, we're working our way through the implications of it. It came out last week, so and there's been quite a lot in terms of planning updates from the government in the last week. So we'll report on that more fully once officers have worked through those implications. But yes, the housing number is now mandatory. Districts are expected to comply with. It's no longer an advisory starting point. It's now expected to be complied with and met in full, and that is 1,115. So it's a slight increase from the number they consulted on, but obviously it's about 36% more than I think the current target was.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah said to me, well, at least it's an easy number to remember, 1115. So there we have that. Councillor Bowers-Flint.
Madam Chairman, just on that, can I ask what is the maximum number in 1 year that we have ever done in this district?
Good question.
Trick
Anybody-
question? No, it's not a
anybody know
trick
the
question.
answer to
I
that?
think I know the number, but I just want officers to confirm it.
I believe there's a chart in the issues and options document that sets out completions.
Sorry, Councillor Abbott.
It's about 1,200. It sounds about right. But I can double check
Okay,
that.
yeah,
but it
okay.
sounds-
Right. Councillor Butland.
when officers come back on housing numbers, and I assume that might be towards the end of January, something like that? Is that the timing?
In terms of,
Well, what I'm
letting us-
thinking is, we are at the moment looking at this from a Braintree perspective, a Braintree district perspective. We all know that the world potentially, following the white paper, could change significantly and very rapidly over the next few months, maybe. And I think we need to be aware of what the likely impact, not just of the increased number of houses being placed on Braintree, but on our likely partners, I'll put it no higher than that at the moment, of Colchester and Tendring. And of course, last time we did the section 1 of the 3 authorities together, so we've got a bit of experience of doing that. But I'm just concerned that there is close liaison between the 3 authorities that may find themselves closer together than they've ever been in a relatively short period of time.
yes, thank you, Councillor Batt. Yes, I think Sarah would like to come in on that.
Thank you. So within the new MPPF update, there's more on the duty to cooperate than there was before. And there is mention of strategic planning back in that. So yeah, you're right. That's something we've got to be cognizant of. In terms of the duty to cooperate, we've got to be sure that we're identifying issues, collaborating with our neighbours and ensuring our plans are in line with each other. And that's what the framework for policy making requires us to do whilst everything else is going on around us, if you like, if that helps.
I think it probably, I mean, my sort of understanding from conversations with officers literally in the last couple of days is that at the moment we carry on with our local plan refresh as it is, but yes, have to be very conscious of the wider implications with local government reform. Yeah. Councillor Abbott.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the word refresh, Madam Chairman. And further to what officers have just, I do struggle with this, and what officers just said. Have I got the numbers right? There's 14,000 houses in the current plan, and extending the plan forward to 2041 will add, and we'll have to find sites for another just over 10,000, plus another 10% buffer. That's what I was reading in the document. So am I right in saying we've got to find sites in total, I might be wrong on this, but this is why I'm asking the question, for another 11,000 approximately houses? Because to me that's not a refresh, it's not a tweak, it's not a small amount, it's significantly bigger than Witham is now in total. So that's my first question. Second question, and officers may not know the answer to this, I don't think we do locally. It's very clear now that the government is holding back on some of the big road programmes. In fact, they've cancelled some of them. Do we know any more about the A12? The report talks about delays. I mean, obviously, there's lots of mixed feeling locally. Rivenall End wants the A12 scheme done because it means they won't be bisected by a trunk road, whereas others, you know, are hostile to it. So that's my second question. And the third one is around the spatial strategy. I mean, obviously we're getting a torrent of announcements from the government, and their clear indication is, you know, you've got to do what we want you to do, and it's growth, growth, growth. But the current spatial strategy has not worked for many villages. I mean, the ward I represent with Councillor Bob Wright, we're looking at 2,000 additional houses in a largely rural ward. I mean, it has not worked. I don't think Councillor Bowers-Philip would disagree with that. Cressing doubled in size. I mean, that was most of these sites are not allocated. What confidence have we got that even with a firm spatial strategy, we can hold the line and we don't end up in another 5, 10, 15 years of communities facing, I believe, completely unsustainable levels of development compared to what we should be doing, which is matching the infrastructure and the services to development. And most of these estates that have been built around Silver and Cressing, they're just housing estates, which is great for the people who want to live there, but there's no new shops, there's no schools, there's no community centres, there's no GP surgery. Frankly, it's been a disaster in terms of what we're supposed to be doing in terms of planning. And the final point I would make is, it says about one of our focuses being reducing road congestion, which I completely agree with. And I'm sure the councillors around this table would say, well, what we need to do is get on and build the A120 and the A12 and all the rest of them. But they get you from A to B. What they don't deal with is the congestion in the town centres and the villages, which is getting worse and worse and worse. And short of American-style bulldozing the houses out of the way and having freeways running through our towns, that's only going to get worse as we get more and more housing development and commercial development. I mean, I'm not making a political point there. It's a statement of fact. If you try and get in and out of Braintree or Whittam in the morning and the evening now, you can see what it's like. So is there anything game-changing that we're looking at in terms of transport which would address that issue? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Right, who would like to come in on any of that?
I'm happy to.
Alan? Yep.
So for the first question, which is to do with the housing figure, it's around about a bit over 10,000. Would probably be looking, so that would take the local plan up to 2041. So it's about an additional 8 years worth of housing growth. In terms of the road programmes, I think we're still awaiting some confirmation on A12 and A120. So I don't think the funding. I think the fund is partly, I think, was agreed for A12, but I don't think it's actually. We're still awaiting a final confirmation on that. And the A120 is very quiet at the moment. I've not heard anything about that. The spatial strategy, yes. I mean, the only way we can make sure that we're getting the sufficient infrastructure and we're avoiding the speculative development is to make sure that our new local plan, makes sufficient provision for all the houses that are identified that we need. It's going to be quite difficult, I think, as we've had quite a lot of speculative applications, and a lot of those sites have actually taken up probably what would be the better sites. We probably would have been allocating this time around anyway, some of them. So we do have, I think it was 130,000 to choose from, but we've got to give careful consideration as to where the best place for those developments are, where can we get the most infrastructure benefit from them, and which ones can support, would help support and alleviate issues within particular towns or villages or things like that. So there's a lot of careful consideration. The local plan does have to be evidence-based, so we need to make sure that we're picking right sites that fit in with our housing, the traffic evidence base, heritage evidence base, all those sorts of considerations as well. So yes, it's going to be difficult, and there's going to probably be some very long meetings, I think, here. But we need to make sure the local plan is based on evidence and is allocating sufficient houses, and that's the only way we can really counteract us having any further speculative development. Because you're quite right, speculative development, when it happens, never provides, or very rarely provides, any significant infrastructure benefit other than what that development is required, because that's what that's all they're required to do, is to meet their own needs. So yes,
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I think in terms of the A12 and A120, we can only hope that those improvements are going to come forward. There was, I think, very clear messages, certainly from the government early on, about infrastructure and how important it was, including transport. And we continue to lobby. I think as recently as Friday, I sent a letter to the Housing Minister, just reiterating that, yes, okay, we are interested in growth and investment in this district, because I think we need to be on their radar, but only if it's going to come with infrastructure. Otherwise, we don't we don't really want to play ball because it is so important, and we particularly mentioned A12 and A120, so I think we can only keep pushing on that and hope that Whitehall are listening. Yes, Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, sorry, thank you for the answers to the officer. Just to clarify, so does that, if I'm reading it right, so you've confirmed it's an additional 10,098 houses we're going to find, but does that include this 10% buffer, or are we going to have to sit here as a committee and actually allocate 11,000 and a bit for the 10% as well?
I think that would require the 10% on top of that figure.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Roughly.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
If I can just come back at the word, we do obviously still have some allocations in the plan that
Yes,
haven't been
yeah.
built yet. So, you know, they would help as well. And obviously we can take into account when full developments
Yeah.
that have happened as well, so or are likely to happen. So.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just wanted to ask 3 questions really in relation to the consultation document. The first is on page 137 of the agenda. Question 14, do you think the inset maps listed above continue to be appropriate? I wonder if that could just be made a bit clearer that what you're referring to is the existing inset maps, i.e. you're thinking about what's been allocated in the past is still appropriate and not thinking about the additional sites that have been put forward. I think that's what is meant by that question, isn't it? This, and also just underneath that there was a box. I wonder if this is one of the ones you think are in the wrong place. There's local plan objectives. I just feel that box that's currently questions 16, 17 and 18 should be just moved so that it sits underneath the section about objectives. And the only other point I had really was there is a section about broadband. I think we ought to also potentially include mobile coverage. I don't know whether that's something that ought to feature in the policies or to draw that out.
Yes, yeah, happy with.
Yeah, I mean, I think broad, mobile coverage would be something that we've covered under infrastructure. I think, but it's the sort of comment we'll be expecting to receive during the consultation anyway. So we can consider that when we look at those objectives. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Madam Chairman, could I just come back?
Yes.
I did read that the section on it's headed broadband. I just wonder whether the wording could just make it a bit clearer that it's mobiles as well.
Sorry, where? Can I just find it? Where are we?
It's at page 156 of the agenda. It's objective 5, broadband.
That's what it's just called in the local plan. That's why it just says broadband.
At the bottom of that about 5G.
So just come back. I mean, I think the only reason why I'm raising it is
Oh, I've got it right.
whether-
Objective 5, broadband.
people reading this document would realise that they're meant to comment on mobile coverage as well.
Oh, yes, okay. Right. 5G. So, apologies, Councillor Parker. What are you suggesting or asking?
Just really whether question 43 should just be reworded so it says, do you think the objective and policy on broadband continues to be appropriate?
Yeah.
I wonder whether broadband and mobile coverage, just so that
Oh, right,
people make
okay.
it
Yes.
realise that
Yeah.
they can comment on both if they
On
want
both.
to.
Yes, yes, all right. Sorry, I get you. Yeah, I think that would be fine. Councillor Van Dolken.
Yes, just following up what Councillor Parker said, of course, we're going to lose our landlines in a year or two, aren't we?
Yeah,
Or
that's
next
true.
year, I can't remember. So I think it becomes even more important for the communities, the rural communities in particular.
Yes, that's a good
Yeah,
point. Yeah,
that's fine.
okay, we'll take that into account. All right. Any other comment? Councillor Bowers?
Yeah, just a very small one, Madam Chairman. In the issues and options consultation document on page 3 of the document, on the table about the stage of creating a local plan, I presume the point, the second point from the bottom, examination of the local plan, I presume that should be 6 to 9 month process from submission date rather than just 6 to 9. And then there's nothing in regards to what that timescale is. So I presume it's going by the dates and everything else. I presume it should just say months.
That's correct. We've been advised by the planning inspector that examinations take between 6 and 9 months.
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yep, fine. Yes, I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah, did you see that, Alan? You see what I mean? So it says
Yeah.
6 to 9 should be months.
yes.
Yeah, okay. Right, okay, good. Right, no more comments. That's been, I think, a good discussion. So the recommendation is on page 117, which is that the issues and options document is approved for consultation, along with the few suggested amendments to that. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Bowles-Flint, and a seconder, Councillor Parker. Thank you. And a show of hands, please, members in agreement. Thank you, that's unanimous. Good, so we have nothing in urgent business, either in public or private session, so I can close the meeting at, it's about 8:42, I think. Thank you very much, members. Good meeting. Thank you.